A suspect also in custody after a shooting in Jefferson County this afternoon. Sheriff James Bailey tells us it happened on Sylvester Gaines Road in Lorman. That's just off Highway 552. Cornelius Carr was arrested for aggravated assault after allegedly shooting a man in the chest. That victim, identified as 37-year-old Reginald Dorsey, he was taken to a local hospital but later airlifted to UMMC. The sheriff tells us he is in critical condition. Carr is currently being held at the Jefferson County Jail awaiting an initial appearance. The reason behind the shooting not known at this time.